Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council Budget Study Session for Monday, June the 18th. All council is here, and is there any members of the public that would like to speak on any item that are not agendized this evening, which is the budget study? If not, we'll move on into what we're here for, which is the budget.
Great.
Connie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This is the third of 3 budget study sessions. We intend to finish up on our fiscal year 18-19 budget review with 2 additional departments that you have not yet heard from, the Community Services Department and then followed by the Cable Department. Following those presentations, we would like to spend a little bit of time with you this evening regarding financing options for a further deployment of fiber to the home as part of an initiative to secure growth in both subscribers as well as subscriber revenue for the cable enterprise. This was a request made by the City Council as part of the discussion earlier this year on financial feasibility for a fiber to the home deployment. We have our financial advisor, Jim Fabian of Fieldman Rollap, here this evening, and he, together with our interim finance director, Jim O'Leary, will make that presentation. So first, before we turn over to the department, I'd like to ask Mr. O'Leary to give a very brief overview of the bigger picture financial aspects of the 2 departments that we're talking about tonight. Thank you.
It's not advancing, but or whatever. But Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, just you have in front of you, and then
do you want to just move it back
right
here? Yeah, we can do it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. There we go.
so as you've seen in the last 2 budget study sessions, have presented the general fund expenditure total, which is $47 million, shown in the second to the right-hand column. And specifically, we're going to begin tonight with the Community Services Department. We have highlighted about $9 million of that $47 million is the Community Services Department, representing recreation, parks, the senior center, and library. So that is the dollar amounts that we're going to be referring to tonight, and the discussion will go on. And then just the preview of the next segment is looking at the cable operating budget, and just the cable overview again in the 18-19 right column. You see that for cable, we're looking at total operating revenues of almost $11 million. Little under $11 million in total operating expenditures for cable, a little over $11 million, an operating surplus, a deficit actually of $130,000 projected based on the budget. And then there's additional debt service and CIP projects that are listed non-operating of $1.1 million. If the budget were to proceed as anticipated at the end of June 2019, the fund balance for cable would be in a deficit and would be negative about a little over $13 million. And with that, we'll turn it over to Community Services.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I'm Mike Stallings, the Interim Community Services Director. It's my pleasure, along with the Community Services staff, to present our proposed San Bruno Community Services 2018 budget and annual report. To begin with, I'd like to thank the Council and the City Manager for your support of the Community Services Department. We also thank the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Senior Citizen Advisory Board, the Culture and Arts Committee, and the service clubs, along with the countless volunteers and full and part-time staff that help present, operate, and maintain the fabulous programs and facilities as your Community Services Department. To continue will be Danielle Brewer.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Tonight I'll be presenting the Recreation Services budget and the Senior Services budget. A few of the highlights for the Recreation Division this year was that staff worked with the Group 4 architects and were able to participate in the community engagement on the development of a new recreation center and aquatic center. We also implemented a new reservation software program, which includes mobile application, online registration at no cost to the customer, and language translation. We have over 2,200 families already registered in the system, and that number is growing every day. We've noticed a huge increase of online registration from our old system, and we estimate about a 10% increase just in the first few months. The special needs program continues with over 350 clients each year. We also delivered community special events, including the popular concerts in the park, with 10 concerts in 2017 and over 300 community members gathered at the Rotary Pavilion each week. Along with Project Pride this year, we offered the pancake breakfast and Easter egg hunt and Halloween happenings at the shops at Tanforan, with over 700 children in attendance at each event. And of course, the 5th annual Community Day in the Park, thanks to the generous donations of the San Bruno community, this was a huge success with about 3,000 community members in attendance. The Senior Center has been active this year despite the vehicle accident on June 19th that displaced the seniors for 9 months. With the help of City Council, we were able to relocate to St. Roberts within 4 days of the accident and continue all services, including the lunch program. Then at the end of August, the seniors were again relocated to the Recreation Center, and then they were finally able to move back to the Senior Center permanently at the beginning of March. With all the moving, we're proud to say that we only had 4 days where the lunch program was not offered to the seniors, and our participation numbers remain constant with over 5,000 seniors using the service monthly. Other senior accomplishments this past year included working with the Public Works to complete the deck replacement project to include new benches and railings, which turned out beautiful. We began to include Cappuccino High School students in many of our Senior Center special events and the lunch program to integrate the senior adult population with the San Bruno youth and teens. And we had over 20 teens assist this year with the senior volunteer lunch. This integration has been a goal to give the teens an opportunity to give their time to the senior adult population. And finally, we completed the resurfacing project at the bocce ball court. The new synthetic surface will allow the leagues to continue to play year-round and not be interrupted by rain. It also reduces the daily maintenance needed on the court, which was being done by the volunteers. Moving on to 2018-19, staff has made an effort to keep expenditures to a minimum and maximize revenue. Therefore, we're not coming with either division with any additional funding or supplemental requests. There are a few initiatives, though, that we are proposing. Recreation staff will be developing an after-school adventures program at Allen School to accommodate the children who will be attending Allen due to the closure of El Cristo School. Currently, Allen has after-school educational and safety program known as ACES, which is a federally funded school program. And that's not able to accommodate all the children coming from El Cristo. And so by offering both programs, it gives the parents the choice, and both programs are run by our department and are quality for the students. In addition, the after-school adventure program at John Muir will be expanded to include the rest of the students that are going to John Muir from El Cristo. We will ensure that all students who need a place to go after school are accommodated. This year, staff will also begin to develop options for programming at alternate locations during the construction of the Recreation and Aquatic Center. It will be vital to continue programming and be uninterrupted as much as possible. Senior service staff is proposing some exciting projects as well. They would like to expand the programs to include offerings that cater to the veterans in our community. There are many seminars, guest speakers, and activities that will benefit these veterans. Another program that we will be implementing is a quarterly Friday night early evening social events. This will bring back these activities. We will bring back these activities and give the senior adults who may not be available during the day an opportunity to attend and meet new friends and learn what the Senior Center has to offer. And finally, a few of the programs that we'll offer as well will be weekly brain games and trivia questions, as well as mahjong tournaments that have been requested. These are just a few of the activities that we are bringing to the Senior Center to keep up with the changing community. We're constantly offering new and innovative programming to keep up with that. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And now I will turn it over to Tim.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm pleased to present for you the proposed operating budget for the library for fiscal year 2018-19. The proposed budget before you this evening represents the library's ongoing efforts to contain costs while simultaneously improving service. Before I jump into our goals and objectives for the upcoming fiscal year, I would like to highlight just a few of our accomplishments for the current fiscal year. Thanks to the generosity of the City Council, the library opened an additional 5 hours per week beginning in September 2017. These additional open hours have contributed to a 7% increase in library visits this fiscal year. Also, thanks to your generosity, the library began lending laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots for people to check out and take home. This has proven to be an enormously popular program, resulting in over 600 checkouts since its inception in September. The library conducted approximately 400 programs over this fiscal year, which attracted over 11,000 attendees, the majority of them children. Last year's summer reading program set an all-time record of 2,230 participants. We've already begun taking signups for this year's program and look forward to producing a similar result. For fiscal year 2018-19, the library is proposing initiatives that will enhance the experience of our users. First, we're proposing as part of a system-wide purchase with the Peninsula Library System to provide an online streaming video service. Internet streaming has become very popular in recent years, as evidenced by streaming services such as Netflix and Hulu. Streaming companies that serve the library market mostly provide documentary, educational, and independent films. We're also proposing to install an electronic charging station for public use. The library building was built over 60 years ago. It was designed and built for the needs of 1950s users. There is a significant lack of electrical outlets. The charging station we are proposing will allow the charging of 8 electronic devices at once. We've received funding for the purchase of the charging station from the Friends of the San Bruno Library. Finally, we're proposing to increase the number of children's international language books by 25%. We've been approved for a grant to help us achieve this goal. By providing a wider selection of international language books, children will be more apt to find books that interest them, and therefore their interest in reading will grow. Library staff will continue to strive to meet the literacy and educational needs of the community in a cost-effective manner, whether our patrons visit us in person or through our online services. This concludes the library's portion of the presentation. I'll now turn it back over to Interim Director Stallings.
Thank you. And across the department, some of the projects we've completed include the care letter installation up at Skyline and College in cooperation with Recology, the Community Day in cooperation with the Posey Parade on June 3rd. The new Citizen Request module is in its first year of review, with over 150 of what we call CRMs, with 85% of them being completed. 100% we respond to saying we're looking into it with a 85% completion rate. In administration, we've had almost 900 picnic rentals this year, over 450 facility rentals, and recreation class registration for a total of about 3,680 separate registrations for the programs. I'll briefly review the facility and parks divisions. In facilities, some of their major accomplishments this year was an extensive painting for the recreation center, the police department, the cable TV office, and the parks yard. We've added a computer space for parks and facility employees at the courtyard to have access for city business and news. They've installed new carpets and linoleum in the cable building. They've hired and trained one of the new full-time custodians. And in collaboration with a grant paying about 80% of the costs, we're completing the conversion of City Hall and the library to new LED lighting. We hope to include other building upgrades in the next fiscal year. We've resurfaced the city marquee with new lettering. The HVAC replacement for the City Hall IT server downstairs has been complete with redundant air conditioning units. We've successfully completed the 2017-2018 street tree pruning pollarding contract, which pollarded about 260 trees. Next year's tree pruning plan is on track to begin on schedule. And along with that 261 trees pollarded by the contract, the city tree crew of 2 has responded to over 800 service calls for tree service. The citywide tree inventory is continuing to be updated, and we should have that complete by this fall. We've recently acquired a handheld tablet that lets the facilities manager, Renee Walsh, actually be in the field, touch where he is, and it comes up with the work plan for that tree. It's pretty cool to know where it is, what's happened, the condition. He can add photographs, work history, all the rest. And the facilities crew of 2 has responded to 1,560 work orders and projects this year alone. In the Parks Division, their current major accomplishments were, per a change in the municipal code, staff has updated all the park signs and provided dog bag dispensers in all the parks to allow for on-leash dogs. They've assisted in the installation of the 2 new public restrooms in City Park. One is currently open, the other should be open soon. They've completed the Path Parkway project in City Park, filled maintenance worker vacancies that was provided by the council in last year's budget, supported another successful year of San Bruno baseball with the help of the user group and the Adopt a Park program, and along with the fire chief and the fire department are continuing to work on the fire mitigation plan. The park needs for this year, we still have a lead worker position that we've been unable to fill. We will complete the landscape work at the western end of the senior center. They'll continue to support Public Works on the development of San Bruno Avenue median project, and the work for the Path Park project at Commodore and Grundy Park starts next Monday. Our on-site meeting is this Thursday. As the interim director, I've enjoyed the last 59 work days. Found a staff that's very motivated and willing to serve the community. We're striving to contain costs and support the city's work plan and initiatives. We see and are trying to meet upcoming challenges and are excited about the future of the new Recreation and Swim Center at City Park. We appreciate the continued support of the community and the City Council for activities, facilities, and programs, and we're all here and glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Maureen? More comments?
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I'm just blown away by how much you all do with as few people as you do it. And I wish I had a magic wand and could enlarge our library so we could increase in parking and so we could increase attendance even now. So I just have a fun fact for you all. So, and no offense to the fire chief. We were talking about well, you'll know why when I say it. We were talking about redoing Station 52 and that it only has 1 bathroom for 6 people. Well, how many bathrooms do we have in the San Bruno Library that serves everybody who comes? 1. So we have... No. So just keep that in mind, and hopefully sometime in the future we'll have a new library.
Thank you, Irene. Laura?
Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate the work that everybody does. I appreciate, Mike, you've been here for a short time, and yet I hear so many good things, so I appreciate the work that you put into the program. I'm happy to hear about the tree pruning program, and I hope that was successful. And I know that there were some questions and some concerns with that, but it was work that was scheduled to get done, and it got done, and that's a win-win for us. And I think I thank you for the staff on the continued programs. Especially, I think the community really enjoys the concerts in the park that extended from August into September, and I think that's been successful. I look forward to continue with staff at the new community center, and I think that there's, exciting times ahead. And so I hope that there's always these great ideas and opportunities to how we're going to continue with the same programs that we've had, and where are we going to do those in other locations when we don't have that facility. And I want to end with, a truck crashes into a building, and within 4 days, we got a program up and running. I've got a mother who has a lot of friends connected in the community, and only positive things that I hear about it. And to get a lunch program and to feed so many people that require and really appreciate that meal up in 4 days is pretty incredible. So thank you to all that hard work. And I plan on actually spending more time in understanding the programs in the library. So I think that it is something that doesn't get looked at enough, and I think it doesn't get the attention, and I didn't even realize it does only have one bathroom, right? So,
Oh,
yeah.
for
Thank you so
both
much.
children and adults.
Yeah.
Artie or Michael?
I think Laura did a really great job of summarizing the amount of work that you do and how much appreciation we have for all of that. The one question I had about in the coordinating with the schools is how close were you guys working together with the school and the school district to make sure of those programs? I just wanted to just chime in on that part to see how closely you guys work together to make sure that was aligned.
Are you talking about the after-school
Yes,
programs?
yes.
We actually met with the superintendent and the two principals of the principal of John Muir and the principal of Allen, to make sure that we are able to accommodate. The other two people in that room that day was the other two after-school sites, after-school programs that are on those sites. So Champions and Happy Hall, I believe, was there as well. But they tend to gravitate to our program because they're familiar with it, and it's much more affordable. So we did work with them to make sure that at the very minimum, all the kids that are in the program at El Crystal are accommodated at those two schools.
Okay,
So we did meet with them.
If I could just add, the school district has been reaching out to us to anticipate issues. They clearly, like we, view us as a critical partner in making sure that this transition for the school district actually works well for the community. So in addition to the meetings around the programming, we also have a meeting coming up here in the not too distant future to begin conversations about the change to traffic patterns.
Okay.
Because you're going to have people coming from new directions to get to both Allen and to John Muir, which we all need to really be thinking strategically about how is that actually going to work. Because we all know that traffic around school sites is already not good, and so we want to make sure that we anticipate that. But we've been very pleased and happy to be working so collaboratively with the school district on many different aspects of this transition that the district is engaging.
Okay. One other question I had about, is about our street trees. Of the amount of trees that are budgeted to be installed, do we install all of them?
I know that 260 of them were pruned as a part of the city crew and contract responsibility. I can double check and get back to the council on the numbers that were actually planted. I don't have that number in front of me, but I can get back to you.
And if you can also add about how much of that, how much does each of those cost?
Yes.
Some neighborhoods desperately need trees. Along the back end of Mastic, across from where the new Plaza apartments, there's just stretches of where there's no trees. And you can see where there was a tree because there was a piece of concrete that's now filled in that tree well. But I think that interested to hear about that and how we could look outside of the city to get sponsorship for planting some more trees, because when you walk down a street and there's no trees on one side, you have to actually look at it or notice it, because you're walking down and it just feels weird, and then you're like, oh, there's no trees on this side, like, wow. But anyhow, so if you can get back, that'd be great.
I will.
And if, whatever the costs are, if we could find a way to be creative with getting volunteers, which I believe, Irene, you were instrumental in planting trees during the centennial.
100.
100 trees, if we could find additional ways for people to kind of join in and fill up and make our urban forest really thrive. So those are my comments. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your report. The one question I had, I was actually walking around downtown and I noticed that the Posey Park, the train station area, is looking a little dry, and I was wondering, is that now part of, that completely part of your operation? Is that part of Parks, or are we still sharing any of that with Caltrain?
The area in the park, the raised planter area, and immediately around the backside of the staircase is city parks. The rest of it is not ours and is done by contract with the transit authority. If there's a specific place or detail that I need to look at, I'll go look at it again. The last time I was there was right before the Posey Parade with making sure everything was there working. And then we had irrigation issues on San Mateo Avenue right before they were paving, so I was spending most of my attention at the other end of the block, getting the irrigation fixed before they paved.
Okay.
But I will look at that end of the block.
Okay. Yeah, and what I noticed was there's some street trees there that looked a little dry. Like,
That might have been
Yeah.
part of what we were dealing with, and I will check it out tomorrow.
okay. And is there anything in the work plan for doing something with the fountain?
I'll have to defer on that one.
Yeah, so the answer is yes. The city council had asked us to get a little bit of feasibility to, rather than repairing the fountain, the plastering that was improperly installed, to look into the possibility of whether that could be converted to a planter. And I had actually asked, and Group 4 had indicated that they could give us a preliminary view of that. I need to follow up with them because I think they haven't done that yet, but that's an issue that is, it hasn't been forgotten, hasn't been done.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was it.
Thank you for your reports, all three of you. Couple things. On the marquee sign, we talked about some new lettering, but I was trying to look even further than that. Are we just buying the lettering because the sign will be there, or is there any strategy or long-term goals to maybe redo it? Or are we waiting for the traffic type report, or do we know?
So if I could stand in here for a second, I've recently heard that there is an interest on the part of the developer of the Plaza apartments to work with the city to see about replacing that sign with something that might be a little bit more visually attractive. So that's a very early heads up to my knowledge, and I see that David isn't in the audience tonight, but we would like to pursue that conversation a little bit and then get back to the council about what ideas might be out there.
Yeah, because as you know, we took it down to a point because
Correct.
of its deterioration.
Correct.
And obviously, that's something that I think, especially with that new development there and it going down, could be something more attractive, shall we say?
I
Something
think we all agree
more
about
inviting.
that. Yes.
Also, the fountain, going back to that, so, yeah, that's something that's been hanging from the other year. I know there was question about the fountain, the costs, as well as planter. And I know you'll reach out to Group 4. Would it be able to email the council with findings, just so that we kind of know where we're at, what a timeline might be?
Yes.
To get that, because though it is our responsibility now, it was not done correctly. But at the same time, too, it just, when you walk by, it looks as if there's just something not done and no explanation as to why. So, but other than that, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
So to ask cable staff to provide a short departmental report. This report will not address the financial implications as are shown on the slide in detail, but be specific to operational issues. We'll move to other more specific conversation about the financial, both the short-term and long-term financial implications as the second part of our program tonight. Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, we would like to review some of the accomplishments of the San Bruno Cable Team during fiscal 2018 for the benefit of the citizens of San Bruno. The Shelter Creek Fiber to the Home project has been completed. The project has met the performance benchmark set by the council when the project was approved. Since August of 2015, San Bruno Cable has increased the number of subscribers at Shelter Creek from 714 to 907. It's a 27% increase, and has increased the average monthly revenues from Shelter Creek from about $59,300 per month to $83,800 per month, a 41% increase. We currently provide service to 73% of the residents there at Shelter Creek. As to the second part of the city's Fiber to the Home initiative at Peninsula Place, staff began construction of the necessary fiber backbone infrastructure this February. The system is gaining new fiber customers as well as converting customers to fiber from the existing coaxial cable plant. Since February of this year, staff has cabled the entire complex and completed the conversion for some 2/3 of the existing customer base, as well as attracting 64 additional new customers. We now provide service to about 57% of the residents there, an increase over about 7% since we started construction. Monthly average revenue has also increased from about $36,200 per month to $41,400 per month. These are approximate figures in the same time period. We anticipate that this fiber project will be complete by mid-August of this year, and we estimate about a 70% market share by the end of fiscal 2019. Beginning in May, staff began construction of the third of our approved Fiber to the Home projects at Crystal Springs Terrace. We have completed cabling one portion of the complex for review by the owners and management, and plan to begin full construction and offering services to tenants by the end of this August. We already have significant market penetration there, in excess of 85%. We anticipate, however, higher per customer revenues as a result of higher levels of service once the fiber project has been completed. Overall, the system has performed fairly well over the past fiscal year. Competitive pressure from AT&T has caused our subscriber counts to have a net decrease of 266 customers during the past fiscal. Monthly revenues at the end of August of 2017, which was the first month that we had our rate increase in effect, was roughly $790,000. Revenues for this past May, and this is an approximate figure, it's roughly $757,000. So a loss of about $30,000 per month, thereabouts. Staff's other major project is the installation and activation of the new network routers for the city, cable TV, internet, and voice networks. This is a significant project and is a substantial and necessary upgrade to our information and communications infrastructure, increasing internet traffic capacity, increasing reliability and ease of configuration of the network. Since gaining approval from the City Council on April 10 of this year, we've begun the initial phases and anticipate that the project will be completed by the end of September this year. Staff has also continued to replace and upgrade components in the existing system and cable and internet system, and we continually evaluate the performance of the various components to identify and correct weak points. For fiscal year 2019, we have in the Capital Improvement Program a request for $100,000 to initiate a rollout of IPTV offering to our subscribers. IPTV, which is short for Internet Protocol TV, will enable subscribers to immediately view streaming video content on their televisions, computers, laptops, smartphones, and the like via an internet connection. This technology also enables users to save television shows and other media to a cloud-based storage service, removing the necessity and expense, both for the consumer and the city, to provide complex and expensive DVR set-top boxes. This will result in lower capital costs for San Bruno Cable, as well as provide more convenience to our subscribers. We are installing fiber cabling to all new retail, apartment, and office construction in San Bruno. These structures will have our fiber services available for use from day one of occupancy. San Bruno Cable began offering residential Wi-Fi service this February. We are now providing this service to over 130 San Bruno residents and anticipate annual revenues in excess of $70,000 per year by the end of fiscal 2019. We are working closely with the County of San Mateo to provide Wi-Fi services to customers shopping in the San Mateo Street retail market area. We are also working to initiate and expand several programs, one of which is a business class for San Bruno businesses. We are creating a bundle of services aimed at solving small and medium-sized business communication needs, including high-speed internet, business phone and television services. Packages will include a significantly higher level of technical support and will include a residential business class for those residents that work at home. Next fiscal year, staff will begin an initiative to offer internet-based security packages, including the most common security needs such as surveillance cameras and window door access control, as an additional service for the city's residents. And finally, we will be expanding our marketing and branding efforts to remind our residents about the great services and product that San Bruno Cable offers, including competitive pricing, no contracts, and an unbeatable level of customer service and technical support. Thank you for your time. The San Bruno Cable team looks forward to another successful fiscal year, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions from council? Comments?
Michael?
Marty's jumping out of his seat.
No, I'm just, those numbers are a little troubling. We're going in the wrong direction, and when are we going to turn the corner to become more profitable? So I don't know if that is the purpose really of what we're going to be here tonight to talk about, but at some point we need to talk about, and maybe that's going to come later, I'm not really sure, of what is our future? Are we going to be in this business or not? I want to be in this business, but I want to be convinced that we're on the right path financially to pay for it. When we have already lost 266 customers this last year to AT&T, and how are we going to make up that money? I need to see the numbers, and I don't think this is currently the time for it to get to those details of where we're going to be, because we could spend hours talking about just cable's future, and I think that discussion is very important to have, and I'm looking forward to discussing that and figuring out, is that the business we want to be in? It's what I believe I want to be in, but we're not seeing the numbers in the right way. So I think it's great of the things that you're planned to do. It's just that we need to have more. I need more information before I could really fully be convinced that we're going to roll this out. I didn't know that we were rolling out residential Wi-Fi, and if I don't know it and I'm not seeing it anywhere, then that's telling me that our marketing needs to be really looked at, and we need this plan. We need a plan together to show how we're going to run cable properly like a business, so we're not falling into the negative. Okay, so those are my initial comments, and I don't know where we're gonna go from here to talk about the big plan of what we're gonna do. If we're losing $30,000 a month from AT&T leaving, where is our reduction, and where are we gonna cut? You know, maybe we should be cutting something somewhere, because, you know, we're at 1.8 and now we're looking at 13.3. So I hope, Mayor, that we find a way to quickly, after this meeting, we're gonna talk about how to finance things, but when are we gonna make this decision? And that's where my concern is. The longer we wait, although I saw that AT&T's having a horrible problem right now, and that's something to capitalize. When that's happening, we should be touting our service and giving people an opportunity to jump in right then and there. Say, hey, you know what? You guys sign up. You know, break your contract. You come over here. We'll do X and we'll do Y and Z. Whatever it takes. We need more people, right? So, sorry for the rambling, but it's just kind of like there's a lot of things going on here that we're already in June, right? So we need to figure this out. So I'm looking forward to the last part of how we finance this fiber expansion.
If I could address, I'm sorry, at least part of that question. The National Cable Television Cooperative, which is a cooperative of the smaller cable systems across the country. There's 3 marketing and advertising firms that have done a great deal of work for systems of our size and the like. We're now soliciting proposals from those 3. We have a very aggressive and visible marketing program going into fiscal 2019. That's certainly my wish.
One last thing is there anybody on Nextdoor that is like looking for these responses? There's a lot of questions on Nextdoor where somebody's saying their service is bad in one area. Well, if they're posting that, they're so frustrated with it. I mean, the first obvious question I have is like, well, have they contacted San Bruno Cable, or are they just complaining? But if we need somebody actively to be on Nextdoor to be able to see those things and get them soon so that it's quickly taken care of and with the right level of customer service. So I just kind of wanted to, is somebody kind of passively monitoring that? Is there some?
That's a good way to put it. I passively monitor Nextdoor for comments on specifically the cable system. And obviously I saw the comments last week on AT&T. For instance, there was an individual talking about poor internet service a couple of 3 weeks ago. So something like that, I actually spoke to that person, reached out and spoke to him.
Okay.
So we're doing that in terms of being proactive and visibly proactive on Nextdoor. That's something we haven't started to do yet.
Most of our technicians, talk about, what happened on, Next Home too.
Okay.
A lot during the day. So everybody in the shops more or less looks at it from time to time. We don't have one person to sit there and,
No,
monitor it,
of course. Okay.
Wish we did.
There's a lot of things that we could try to, how we can improve that interaction with the public to making sure, like, if you have a problem, then you got to call. Don't sit there and wait, and things can get fixed really quickly if our staff know about it.
Yes.
So.
And if you're on San Bruno Cable.
Well, it's got to be on San Bruno Cable, So, yes, that's my piece.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your report. The one question I had, so you talked a little bit about the marketing efforts and what's coming down the line, but looking through what's outlined in the budget, I don't really see it in the goals, and I don't see it anywhere in any of the categories. So, are you guys anticipating a budget for that? Or have you thought about how much you plan on spending on the marketing effort?
There's a line item in the budget, forgive me, I can't think of what budget line item it is, but it's professional services. And there's $60,000 in the budget there.
Okay.
And that would be, and then there's that throughout the budget, some other funds, but that
Okay.
would be the big,
That would be it,
the big
okay.
amount
So it-
specifically.
It says
that-
sales services, so I guess that it would be captured under that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you. That's it for now. Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned in your report that the overall system has performed fairly well. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? I mean,
Right.
what, and when you say the overall system, is it everything, including fiber, it's internet, it's everything?
Well, yes, I think we've performed fairly well. We've obviously lost customers and lost a little bit of ground, but we've lost those customers in the other parts of the system, not the portions where we're doing fiber to the home, is the way I would look at that. I think with all the efforts that AT&T has done in the past some months, having a net loss of only 266 is not bad. I think we need to do some very aggressive marketing and get that message of who and what we are and what value we have to this community out there better.
And I agree with that. I think that, we offer a lot of different options, right? So it's phone, internet phone service, right? It's the cable. I mean, cable box technology that we have today isn't really a above par programming that's out there, right? I mean, I was a TiVo user many years ago. It was the best thing that was out there, and then other companies came. And so we're really trailing behind, when my kids who are bugging me about wanting to get online TV. I was watching the Warriors game, and you would never believe this. In Redwood Valley, I was visiting one of our offices. I had no cable. I'm on internet watching a Warriors game. That's pretty fabulous, but I don't do that through San Bruno Cable, although I still have San Bruno Cable. So it's, those changes that really we need to move forward if we're going to stay competitive, and we're going to continue to lose. Because really, by rights, I don't want 5 different bills. I want that one bill, that one package that gives me my internet service, it gives me my cable. But then you got to think about really where are we going? Kids today don't have home phones, right? And the average person isn't moving into a home. It's like a cost they're cutting out because we all have cell phones. So internet really is the direction it's going. Which is why it makes sense to invest in a fiber system so that we have an amazing download speed. So those other things that we're offering, do we continue to offer them? Or are they the things that are kind of draining us and we really invest in our infrastructure and what's going to get us the biggest bang for our buck? And I think the comment that Marty's making is that we've yet to make a decision. And so then I kind of direct this comment back to staff, and that is, what's the next step for us? And tonight's not it. But I think, we're going to continue going down the direction we're going, but we need to make a decision at some point. What's the best decision for the city? Do we cut our ties completely, which is one option? Do we cut our ties in some areas? And do we really kind of expand? I love the idea about talking about security, because I think, when I walk into Costco and everybody, and I know a lot of friends now, I'll get the security system before I know they're kind of popping up everywhere. But we're not all technically savvy, so we have problems with that system. We need, which is where San Bruno Cable comes in, and it provides that, one-stop shop. I don't have time to mess around with this system. So I like the direction it's going. I guess there's a time that we need to still kind of have this discussion about what are we doing with the system. And so I guess I'll refer back to staff.
Thank you for your report. When we talk about the numbers that are lost or the numbers that are gained, do we take that opportunity, whether gaining a client, losing a customer, that we actually ask the questions to gather the very usable data for marketing?
Yes, we most certainly do. So, and the questions, basically are, basically, why are you leaving us, for instance? And we'll get, well, I'm moving. There's a significant number every month of people moving in and out. Or AT&T, or maybe there's financial reasons or something along those lines. So yes, we do collect that data.
And I think the other thing that's been alluded to by a couple colleagues already is just, obviously marketing is great and is essential, but do we really know what we're marketing? are we here as a council, as a community, as a cable department, do we really know what is the best that we're going to market? I can go back to years and decades ago when it was a different thing, different time, right? There wasn't all the other competition, and we had a different flavor on how we operated in the community, what we gave back, what we recorded, what we played back on the air of Channel 3, 1, or 11 over its years, that really moved the community. That they wanted to be a part of this because they saw the high school games, they saw the junior high games, they saw the graduations, which we still do some of that, and I realize that, not as much, but we can't be everywhere, and I get that. But I'm just wondering that the conversation does need to be had is what is the best direction? What is the best business decision for this community with its assets that it has, so that it retains what it has? So whatever future councils make a decision, that we leave it in the best hands possible, as well as for the community's asset, because it is theirs. But I believe we do need a conversation that really gets to the crux of it, of what is our goal? What is our plan? You talked about 2019 with a marketing strategy with, budget approved. Well, that's where we're at, next year. So, but what are we doing now? And so I myself are also interested in some of those questions. Thank you. I don't know if there's anything else from staff or.
No. Thank you very much. The questions that the council is asking, you are right on point in terms of where we are at the current time, and very bluntly put, this enterprise is literally at a fork in the road. A decision needs to be made relatively quickly about what is the long-term future, and I don't mean just are we going to do this or that program or service. I mean, are we going to stay in the business? The information that we have to date that we've presented to the City Council suggests that the city needs to be positioned and prepared with the correct infrastructure to deliver high-speed internet, highest speed internet, gigabit service, if it is to remain competitive in this business. The enterprise may also need to consider whether it moves completely away from the video business. We spend a very significant amount of our annual budget on video programming, negotiating and entering into agreements with content providers. And that is a high dollar cost portion of the business. It is an increasingly lower numbers of subscribers. Where we're gaining internet subscribers, we're losing video subscribers, but our costs are disproportionate, they're backwards. So there are a number of important topics that need to be carefully considered. We've started this conversation with the City Council in a tangible way with the feasibility analysis that we provided to the City Council earlier this year, a couple of months ago. And the conversation tonight follows on that with a portion of the discussion, but probably not everything that the City Council needs to, neither all of the information nor are we expecting you to be prepared tonight for an actual concrete decision. What we want to do is to follow up on your request that we talk to you about how should the City Council be interested in moving forward with a fiber to the home deployment citywide, how would that potentially be paid for? The next very important question is, do we have a realistic expectation that if we made that investment, then that investment could be recovered in a reasonable amount of time? Unless the council would like any more conversation, I'd like to ask Jim O'Leary, followed by Jim Fabian, to give you an overview of our financial analysis, both of the deficit situation that currently exists in the cable enterprise And then subsequently, to answer your question about how might a fiber to the home initiative be financed, and importantly, what are the implications of a decision to potentially do that? So those are the topics for tonight.
Ready for them?
Are we still having technical difficulties?
I can find it on here.
And I guess a question could be, so based on, we're gonna get this information tonight regarding the financials of it, but what would be the next step for staff? Would it to be to have a study session and really sit down and get, I mean, I guess when I, you know, and I hear you, and I need to understand all aspects of it, right? And I think you're right in the direction that you're even talking about is video negotiation, and what we offer is really something of, is really what we're losing. Those viewerships we're losing, and they're purchasing the other thing. So, but I don't know, I don't understand the cost and the effort behind that part of it, and I want to get to know everything. So,
If I could make a brief comment on that, there's not a cable operator in this country who isn't trying to figure out a way to get out from under having television as
Yeah.
something they provide. It's an increasing cost and increasingly
Yeah.
difficult way to make margins. Comcast, for instance, last month was looking at, if you wanted to have higher internet speeds, you would have to buy their TV packages as well. So they're looking to hook things on in different ways. But everybody wants to get out of television as soon as they possibly can.
I have a question before we move on. Have you looked at other small cities? We're a unique situation, right? There isn't anybody in San Mateo County that's in the situation we are, but there are in other cities or in other states.
Yes.
So you guys do
Yes,
work
we have.
with and kind of share. You guys are all in that club together, right?
Yes, there's, again, the National Cable Television Cooperative, which is a cooperative. So Al and I were both at a conference in San Antonio a few months ago. I'll be going to a conference in Southern California the end of next month, which, again, and it's just a lot of people getting together who have small systems, some much smaller than ours, even, and talking about whys and wherefores, how they make it work.
So someone's already figuring it out, right?
Yes,
We just
and there's an
piggyback on
organization
that.
of municipal fiber types of municipalities out there as well. So there's a variety of resources.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. So turn it over to Jim O'Leary.
Thank you for the technical help.
Mr. Mayor, members of this. Members of the City Council. I think some of the questions tonight are exceedingly important as far as the viability and the plan, the goal for San Bruno Cable. Again, the focus of this particular presentation is answering a more narrow question as far as financing for the fiber project. But as Jim Fabian and I are making our remarks, we'll bear the bigger question in mind and try to be a little bit more expansive in answering or shedding more light on the bigger question. So we want to talk about the cable fund finances, the financial condition of the cable fund. And one of the elements that I want to draw to the council's attention is the impact on the general fund, on the city's general fund, of the condition of the cable fund, because there is an interplay between the general fund and cable. And as we're talking about the financing options, I think we're going to be focusing on the need for the general fund to participate in the financing options. So I think the background is important in talking about the financing options. And so we're briefly going to, so we'll talk about the finances, we'll talk the financial statements of the cable fund. Just very briefly summarize the discussion and the presentation from April 10th in talking about fiber to the home, and then talk specifically about three financing options that exist at various levels of feasibility. That they are not equal options, and I think it'll be relatively self-evident as we go through it that there is, in fact, probably one option that if the council wanted to go forward with financing fiber to the home, that you could focus on. So with that, and in addition to the PowerPoint handout, there are a couple of financial statements that I've left with each of you, and I'd like to talk about these in a little bit. And I truly hope I don't have my green eye shade too tightly adjusted here. So if I lose you, or if you have questions about the financial statements, please ask, because I would like to make it as simple as possible. So the first thing I want to do is talk about the cash and investment report that the City Council receives every month in your agenda packet, presenting as part of the investment portfolio of the city, the cash position of all of the funds. And the slide that on the PowerPoint is a summary of a cash report back from June of 2017 at the end of the last fiscal year. And I'll tell you in a minute why I selected June of 2017. But what I want to point out is that cash report shows that the cable fund at that moment in time, June 30th of 2017, had a cash deficit. Again, this is a cash report, had a cash deficit of $9.5 million. And I think there's been some discussion with the council by the city manager, just that concept of negative cash. And the negative cash is a little bit, it's esoteric. There is no such thing as negative cash. You can't spend negative cash. You can only spend cash. But from an accounting perspective, in order to wall off the cable fund and to show it, to keep it as an enterprise account and a self-accounting unit, we have shown expenditures exceeding the revenue that has gone into the cable fund as negative cash. And so you can see there, and just the handout, this is the actual cash report that you have in front of you from June 30th. And I've circled this negative cash, 9.514. But what I also pointed out here is the four arrows on the left of this report are representing cash in the general fund. These four combined are what the auditors consider cash, or for the general fund per se. And the significance of, and I guess the other thing I would point out is these four funds, if you add them together, the cash balance is about $21 million. So the second page of this handout, and just continuing, it's summarized, it's in very summary form in the PowerPoint. But what this is the balance sheet for the cable fund directly out of our CAFR. And that's why I picked June 30th for the cash statement, so that it matched the balance sheet for the last CAFR we have. And what I wanted to point out, and again, on the summary form in the PowerPoint, it's not really clear. If you look at the balance sheet for current assets on this handout, you see the cash is shown as zero for the cable fund. Really the first line down, the cash is shown as zero. The auditors will not show negative $9.5 million. And so the best they can do is report zero in the cable fund. And if you go down to the middle of the page, you see with another arrow, due to other funds, $9.5 million. The exact amount of the deficit, what the auditors are showing for the financial statement of the cable fund is zero cash and showing a due to other funds, which is essentially a loan from other funds of $9.5 million. I didn't give it to you, but if you look at the financial statement from the CAFR of the general fund, it's the mirror image. What I showed you on the cash report of $21 million in cash in general fund accounts, if you look at the audit for the general fund, it shows $12 million. The auditors have deducted $9.5 million out of cash in the general fund, and they are showing an asset, a receivable from the cable fund of $9.5 million. So what the point I want to make is, even though we've gone to great effort to wall off cable as an independent enterprise account, the reality is, from an accounting perspective, from the auditor's perspective, the general fund has physically loaned the cable fund $9.5 million, and that negative cash is not a real accounting treatment.
Pretty good.
Pretty good? Pretty good?
Good.
Oh, okay.
It is hard to understand, for those of us who are not accountants, so.
It's even harder to internalize. But, so, okay so far?
But over time, monies from cable were going into general fund. So is there that? Okay, don't even go there.
That's, I
Don't confuse
think
it.
I'm gonna get, I
He's gonna get there.
don't know if
Gotcha.
you're talking about the equity
Yeah, 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 yeah.
transfer. I don't know if
Okay.
you're talking about the
Yep,
equity
yep, yep.
transfer, but that, I was just talking about cash in
Gotcha,
a balance
gotcha.
sheet.
Thank you.
And the reality of a loan. I mean, that is,
Yep.
that is the essence of the last 5 minutes, was the general fund has loaned cable $9.5 million.
As of June 30th.
Can I get clarification on that, as well as the other two with arrows? Or is it just account fund number 001 general funds?
I'm not saying where it came from, because the auditors haven't specified where it's come from. They've just said, out of those four,
Behind the store,
but behind the
over
door,
here, although there are 3 accounts.
there's 4 accounts, because
four.
actually there's one further
I'm
down
sorry,
there.
4 accounts.
Four.
It's, we don't know where that is either. It's just kind of 25%, maybe whatever.
Don't
However
even-
we want.
I'm
Don't get
going-
stuck in the weeds.
No, it's
No,
important.
no,
It is
no, but-
important
but-
that there's 4
but-
different accounts.
But, just to jump ahead,
Okay,
but to jump ahead on this part, for this part, the staff's recommendation to the council is the council needs to formalize this loan from the general fund to the cable fund, and we need to actually select how we're going
That's
to
your
do it.
choice.
So that's step one of the recommendation, is that we actually do that.
Makes sense.
And I can't even tell you exactly what I would say, how to do it, but that's
Makes
step
sense.
one, is I think that needs to be done. And the auditors would be happier. I mean, the auditors are not thrilled by
Right.
us continuing
It's not
showing
clear.
this negative cash.
It's not
So
crystal clear.
it's not crystal clear, and obviously.
Can't just continue to sit the way it has been.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Or it can, because it has.
Well,
Or legally, we have to fix it.
You know, legally, you don't have to fix it, but I would say it is financially best practice, and I think you're gonna hear from Jim Fabian when he has a turn to talk. You know, messy books are not necessarily a good financial practice, and this is not clear, so it needs to be clarified.
and the auditor's action are making it actually pretty clear.
Yes.
They're not saying where it's coming from, but they are saying that the fair representation of the city's books is not negative $9.5 million in negative cash. They're saying that's really not a fair representation. So they're taking action to change it. And I'm saying they're changing it, but the council's never taken formal action to do it. And sort of the recommendation is to take formal action to do it. I think that stands on its own. So in the PowerPoint, you see, this is pretty much a repeat, especially, I think we might have changed one of the other column, the left-hand column. But essentially, what I want to just show you again is the proposed 18-19 budget and the $130,000 deficit for operations. And then there's a 1.1 million for debt service and capital projects and so forth, showing a fund balance negative. Just one thing I might add, changing the issue is negative cash. That is the issue. We're not going to really affect fund balance in the general fund or the cable fund, because a loan is just, for the general fund, it's another asset. It's not it's not cash. It's a receivable. So at the end of the day, as it flows down, it's not going to change your fund balance. There's still going to be a negative fund balance, but the issue is the negative cash. Well, I'll come back to the loan part and the interests of the auditors in a second. So just related to this particular slide, the other financial statement I wanted to show you, the third of this secondary handout, is in fact the budget, is the detail of the right-hand column there. And again, this is right out of the budget, right out of the budget binder for 18-19. And again, wanted to just show $10.9 million in revenues. It does break down for you the various categories, basic cable, internet. It does show the basic revenues, and just again point out to you sort of the discussion. I mean, you see basic cable services generating or projecting $3.2 million in revenues, and internet services $4.4 million. So again, gets the order of magnitude and the importance of the internet and the fiber project. Again, among the expenses is $375,000 in equity transfer to the general fund. And if I can go back to equity transfer for a second without belaboring the point. When I wasn't there 40 years ago, when the cable department was set up, 38 years ago I was there, but not 40. When it was set up, I believe among the reasons the city council decided to get into the cable business, in addition to providing wonderful cable services and so forth, was a recognition that there was a benefit to the general fund by doing the equity transfer. And if you go back to our discussion April 30th, when talking about revenues and talking about the general fund, and the sort of the underwhelming revenue that the city generates in property tax and sales tax and so forth, that the benefit the city has is the diversity of its revenues. And I would just point out that a revenue, I mean, the diversity of the revenues coming into the general fund, one of them was always conceived as the equity transfer. And I can look up the year in like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the equity transfer into the general fund was $960,000. It's proposed in 18-19 at $375,000. So the general fund, you know, look, put your general fund hat on as opposed to the cable hat, and the general fund has lost over $500,000 annually in its diversified revenue streams. I guess the only other thing, again, the operating service, just looking at the operating deficit in this detail shows, again, $129,000 as the operating deficit for the fund. That's my comments on the financial statements, and unless you have any question. So I guess back to the sort of recommended actions, and sort of following up with the conversation with Councilmember Medina. I mean, one of the things I would believe, and this I think entails some additional discussion, I think there's merit in continuing the concept of the Cable Enterprise Fund. I think there is, and as long as we account for the impact on the general fund, that the concept and the notion of an enterprise account still has merit. The other part of what I think needs to be done is actually formalize the borrowing, you know, and just another analogous situation was the city formally lent the redevelopment agency money. And it was set up as a receivable, and this was on the books for 20 years. With the closure of the redevelopment agency, we're actually getting paid back that money. And in the same way, I guess I would visualize a formal agreement. I mean, one of the things I think the formal agreement, the other part that the auditors would say is, you can't just say you have a loan. It has to be a real loan. And one of the principal notions of a loan is repayment. You just can't lend money and it won't be a loan unless there's a path to repayment. And I have some ideas there, and I think we can set it up. I've talked to the auditors as far as what they would think would be the minimum that we need to do, but I think that's for discussion in some detail. But again, keep in mind, a loan probably has to be written off if it's a non-performing loan. If it's not being repaid and has no potential to be repaid, that's not a loan. So that is something that needs to be to bear in mind. So unless there's any specific questions, just wanted to talk very briefly about the citywide fiber to the home project and the report that you received on April 10th regarding the feasibility of a citywide system, and just recall for you that really the essence of the report was looking at Shelter Creek and the experience of Shelter Creek. If that experience were extended citywide, what would be the potential for the citywide implementation of fiber? And I just noted again, as the department indicated to you, even since that report, we've made further strides related to Peninsula Place and to Crystal Springs. This slide is not exactly correct. The report estimated that the cost of the fiber project was $10.4 million. If you remember, on April 10th, in addition to getting the report on the fiber to the home, the city council also approved $1.6 million for the router project that the department discussed today. In the resolution suggesting that this project go forward and approving the project, the city council directed the finance department to determine a lending mechanism to pay for the $1.6 million. And what I would recommend is if the department, if the city council elects to go forward with a $10.4 million project for fiber, that we wrap this 1.6 financing into that project, because that would be the lowest net cost of being able to do it. If you decide not to do the fiber project, I would come back with some alternate form of financing, but the 10.6, and we may, depending on sort of the mood of the council, we may come back and ask you to actually adopt a resolution saying that it is your intent to finance the $1.6 million, just so that we don't run afoul of IRS if you want to do it, just in order to leave your option open. At one of the next meetings coming up, I might ask you to actually adopt a resolution. Non-binding, but it would give the council flexibility. So the report estimates that cable revenues are going to grow with the fiber to the home throughout the city, and ultimately projected that the repayment of $10.4 million could occur between 14 and 27 years based on projected increase of revenue. The report did not specifically say, but just in contacting and getting further detailed information from the consultant, the net outflow of the work done by the consultant is that in the first year, when the project is half complete, there will be $345,000 in additional revenue, and that the full implementation of fiber to the home will generate an additional $675,000. So that is the dollar parameters of the report that was done by the consultant. So and that's the 11%. That's the impact of 11% increase in internet revenues. And keep your eye on the 675, because that's an important number. So, unless there's any question, I would turn to Jim Fabian to talk about options for financing the project.
Thank you, Jim. Mayor, members of council, Jim Fabian of Fieldman Rolapet Associates. I've had the pleasure of being in front of you a couple times now over the last year plus, and appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I've been working with Connie and Jim to look at various funding options that might be available to look at providing the funding for the fiber to the home project. On this slide here, you can see that we have looked at 3 different options. One would be an internal borrowing from the general fund or other city funds, like Jim has been talking about, related to the repayment of the negative catch position in the cable TV fund. Another option would be a bank loan, where we go out and we do a solicitation to a bank for a loan to pay for the fiber to the home project. And then the final option would be a public offering of debt. So in looking at the internal borrowing option for the city, what we tried to do is present you with pros, cons of each of the different options. And the internal borrowing, where you utilize the city as the bank per se, would provide you with the lowest interest cost and the lowest fixed cost, because there's really no external parties involved in this transaction. The city's in control of the process. So it would be as Jim mentioned, with the repayment of the fund balance deficit that exists. It would be a formalized loan that would be adopted to loan the cable TV fund the dollars to do the fiber to the home project. What's the cons associated with this approach would be it would be the highest annual payment because it would be the shortest repayment term. Typically, a loan like this would be a 5 to 7 year term that you would want to repay it by. And then there would be impact to the liquidity of the city's general fund and other funds that were used as the payment source. Just to note, the city has used this approach in the past. The Shelter Creek project that was used for the demonstration project was done under this manner, where there's a repayment to the city's general fund for the upfront capital investment. So that's option one, the internal borrowing.
If I could just add, and in particular, if in fact the true cash balance in the general fund accounts is $12 million, I don't think from a liquidity point of view you could take $12 million from the general fund. So it would be my thinking that if the council selected this, we would probably have to borrow from the water and wastewater enterprise accounts, which we legally could do. We'd have to, well, I think that would be the significant amount, and I think that would actually impact the liquidity. I don't think we could borrow that money from the enterprise accounts for the 5 to 7 years, and I think we're really talking about 3 years to 5 years at the maximum, closer to three years. So I think that really creates the feasibility question of this approach, that could we really borrow $12 million without adversely impacting other funds?
Thank you. Then the next option that we talked about was the bank loan. So this would have no impact on the city's liquidity, so there wouldn't be any need to look at the internal funds of the city to be the bank. It would be an external bank. As I indicated on the slide here, a lot of banks have expressed an interest in working with the city, lending the city money. So there would be a lot of demand from banks to be able to provide this type of loan. This type of loan would typically be a 7 to 10 year payback, no more than 10 years that you would repay it over. Again, it would have a high annual amount. The banks would go through their own internal credit approval process, review process to determine whether or not they would lend the money. There would be a need to secure the loan with a city asset. We haven't determined yet whether the actual fiber optic network could be that asset, or we would need to look at other assets of the city, like this building or other buildings of the city. But there would need to be a physical asset that would have to be used as collateral. The city has used bank loans to purchase fire trucks and fire engines in the past. JP Morgan Chase, I think, was the provider. Jim has spoken to several banks recently that have, as I mentioned, expressed interest in lending money to the city. So that's option number two. Option number three would be a public offering. And the advantages of a public offering or a bond issue would be the lowest annual payment to the city. It would provide the longest repayment term, 20 to 30 years. It would take advantage of the city's strong credit rating. Some of the cons of this approach would be you have your high fixed costs. You have to hire a consultant team to do the transaction. You have initial disclosure to the bond market to be able to provide investors with a thorough knowledge about the project, the city's finances, the ability to repay, and then you would annually update that disclosure to the bond market. And again, it would require the city to look at encumbering assets of similar value. So when we think about a $12 million loan, it would be an asset or a pool of assets that have roughly that same value of approximately $12 million typically from a replacement value for property insurance perspectives. The city has used public offerings in the past. The police station was done as a public offering. We did the pension obligation bonds that we used to pay off the side fund. And then most recently, we used public offerings for the water and wastewater improvements. Those were done under the revenue bonds where the rates and charges of the funds were used, but they were public offerings of debt. So those are the three different options that we have.
So just order of magnitude for the council's interest, and I'm looking at the 2 points for all of the options, the lowest annual payment and the longest repayment term. And the public offering would give us the opportunity to finance it probably between 20 and 30 years. I talked to Jim, and 30 years for a technology project seems a little long for me. And so we put together some numbers for a 20-year public offering at $12 million. And the debt service, based on current rates, I mean, this is not guaranteed, but just order of magnitude, the debt service on a 20-year, $12 million offering would be in the range of $680,000 to $690,000 annual would be the debt service amount. And that's why I wanted to draw your attention back to the full projected revenue increase by the fiber to the home based on Steve Bloom's work was $675,000. So there is a theoretical match to some degree between that revenue and the debt service for the public offering. Again, there's no guarantee on that revenue, you know, so it's different than the water and wastewater financing where we can reasonably expect you have a 5% rate increase and you can reasonably expect what the revenues are going to be. It's wholly different with cable, but I think it's just interesting the match between the 675 and the debt service for the public offering. And just back to the other two, back to the loan, the bank loan, if it were in fact a 7 to 10 year financing, it would probably be double the debt service payment every year. So we're probably talking about $1.2 to $1.4 million a year in debt service, and the internal borrowing would probably be even more, because if we're talking about a 3-year term or a 5-year term and the need to pay back the enterprise accounts and so forth, we would have to have debt service of even a greater amount. So just wanted to point out those parameters.
So again, in looking at the public offering, we think the most feasible funding option would be to explore the idea of public offering. This would be based upon the strength of the city's general fund, the credit rating of the general fund, and in order to look at going forward with this type of approach, we'd be looking at a lease revenue bond issue that would be secured by general fund revenues. There would be the need to encumber assets or a pool of assets of an equal value of the bond issue. So just for round numbers, if we had a $12 million par amount, we would need $12 million of assets that have values equivalent to $12 million. The city's general fund would be the backing for this debt. The rating of the general fund would be used to secure the lowest interest rate possible. You might recall that the POBs were recently upgraded to AAA by Standard & Poor's. And that's based upon the nature of public of pension obligation bonds, where you went through a validation proceeding. your current general fund credit rating is probably a AA+ for a credit of this type. So it's very, very strong. And what we're looking at is either a 20 to 30-year term. We don't have any data yet on the useful life of the fiber optic system yet to be able to determine what the best repayment term would be. I think Jim's trying to tailor it more towards what the revenue might be generated from the actual investment of the into the system. So that's where the $700,000 came from. But in thinking about this idea of a public offering, I really want to stress that this really relies on the general fund, the strength of the general fund, the prudent management that the city has used over the years to position the general fund to be such a highly rated general fund. I mean, to be AAA for your pension obligation bonds is a great position to be in. Your pension obligation bonds are a payment of the general fund. You do have some other leases that we'll talk about. If you could please go to the next slide. So in talking with Connie and Jim, what I wanted to look at and set the stage of in terms of your thinking is, okay, when you look at the general fund and you think about everything you have to do in the general fund and what are your potential capital requirements in the community over the next 5 to 10 years, you have a lot of demands for utilizing the credit strength of the general fund. And so I went and I looked at Standard & Poor's and looked at their credit criteria that they use to evaluate a general fund. And so typically they look at, for a highly rated credit like yours, to have debt levels that are less than $2,000 per capita or per person. And so they would take your total debt and divide it by your population of roughly 46,000. Then they would look at your total assessed valuation in the city and divide that by the amount of the debt, and they would want it to be less than 3% of the market value or assessed value of the community. Additionally, they would look at when they think about your total debt of the general fund, they would say, we need it to be 8% or less of your total general fund expenditures. And then they would look at how quickly are you repaying the debt, the rapid debt amortization, and that is greater than 65% per year. And then they would want to make sure that there's not a lot of escalation in the debt profile. So that's the framework that Standard & Poor's looks at when they evaluate a general fund credit. Okay, so what I did is then I said, okay, well, let's look at your debt. We have the 2013 pension obligation bonds that we talked about to pay off the side fund. You also have equipment and facility capital leases of roughly $221,000, and I think that's for those 2 fire apparatuses that we discussed earlier. So you have about $1.4 million. And then I just went to the recommended budget, looked at the revenues, roughly $45 million. So you have about 3.14% of your revenues, and then your expenditures of about $46 million, and you have 3%. So you're well below those criteria that Standard & Poor's had. And then what I did next is I said, okay, well, let's think about whether we do a borrowing to pay for the fiber to the home project, and we talked about that $700,000 on an annual basis. So I added that into the debt that you'd have outstanding, and you can see that number now is almost $1.9 million. You add that to the leases, and you have roughly $2.1 million. So you go up from 3% to, still a very manageable less than 5% number. So you're well below that 8% threshold that the S&P looks at. You're also well below their per capita and the AV per percentage that they also look at. And then the last thing I did is I just wanted to give you some ballpark parameters on, well, if you use your general fund debt capacity to do a fiber to the home project, how much do you have left? And this is just static in time as of right now. And so you can see that based upon your current year recommended expenditures, to be at 8%, that would be about $3.6 million, $3.7 million. We talked about 2.1 million. So you would have roughly 1.6 million of general fund borrowing capacity still to be used for other high community demands for infrastructure. That would equate to right around $24–25 million of additional borrowing that you could conservatively look to do and maintain your current high credit rating. And this, again, is just a snapshot in time based upon current revenues, expenditures, the debt that you have outstanding, and just to try to give you some framework to be looking at this decision about, is this the best use of our general fund borrowing capacity now, and what would the impact be for other important community needs you might have in the future. So going to the next slide, just wanted to talk about next steps. This is just a very high level idea. If there was a consensus to want to move forward on this, we'd come back again and get into more detail about the specifics of a public offering in July or August, come back in August, September for actual approval of the documents, and then look at a bond issue in September or October where you'd have money in hand to be able to do the project.
So again, thank you, Jim. Again, tonight, our intent was to give you some more information. This is not easy stuff, and so we'd be happy to answer any questions. I think the takeaway from the conversation tonight, however, is that the City Council has been, over this last several months, engaged in a more comprehensive discussion around community needs. And you don't need me to tell you that there are a variety of pressing needs about which the City Council and the community are concerned, and that are driving consideration of the need to look for additional revenues. Now, this picture that's been presented to you tonight by our financial advisor gives you some perspective, I think, about not only what you could do with respect to this particular community interest, the expansion and the stabilizing in the future, the setting the stage for the potential of future viability and vitality of the cable enterprise. It's also giving you a picture of the reality, which is that there's a constraint to the city's ability to utilize borrowing as a marker of what kinds of funding you have and what kinds of funding you could leverage for a variety of community needs. Another tax measure, for example, some number of months or years into the future could increase general fund revenues. Obviously, there's a number of variables in the information that Mr. Fabian has presented to you, could change this picture a little bit. But we wanted you to understand clearly again, that there's a finite capacity. We've presented to you with this information what that capacity looks like right now. And as I think Jim indicated as well, the ability that the City Council has to leverage that potential relies in large measure on the fact that the city has historically maintained not just a good but an excellent credit rating. You could make choices that would reduce that credit rating. You would still be creditworthy, but borrowing costs would go up. There's impacts and issues, probably an endless number of permutations of how this picture might look in the future if you did this or that, or you did something a little bit differently. So I hope that this information has been useful, and would like to give you the opportunity to question our financial experts here tonight if that would be of value. I hope that this information has been understandable and it at least gives you a little bit of perspective about the financial reality of the situation that we find ourselves with.
Questions by council?
I think the presentation was good, and I appreciate the way that was laid out. It was very understandable. So, thank you.
Irene?
Yeah,
Micro?
I get it. It's a lot to think about.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, not about the finance part. I appreciate how it was laid out, and I can understand it. Let me rephrase that. I have a couple of questions. You talked about the city payback being expected to be 3 to 5 years if we borrowed from the city, if we did internal borrowing. Is that standard, or is that just somebody said that's what it should be, or what?
I said 3 to 5 years because we would have to, I think, take a significant part of the borrowing out of the enterprise accounts. And just depending on the schedule and the liquidity needed to complete capital projects. I mean, what we're doing is taking money that has been built up for capital projects. So we'd have to coordinate with that schedule and just see exactly, but it was having the enterprise accounts in mind that I said 3 to 5 years would probably be the period that we could borrow money from. So it's not based on any standard or anything beyond the enterprise accounts.
Okay, and have you thought of or looked at a combination, like some from the city, some from the banks, some from, well, not from the banks, but some from the public offering? Is that something to look at?
I don't think that we've looked at that in any detail, but this gives you something to play with, and so the answer is we could certainly do that. We wanted to give you this information as kind of a marker so that you could guide us and in developing alternative scenarios with that kind of thought process.
Okay, and, well, go ahead, and then I'll.
I guess I would just respond that if you're in some part going to do the public offering, that's the longest repayment period, and it's the smallest annual debt service. So if you're gonna do anything in that area,
It would be more expensive.
you'd probably wanna do the whole thing, but that would be, I think.
Oh, okay.
But we haven't talked about it.
It was just a question.
And not, you know, there's many ways it could be done.
Well, from all the comments that the council has made previous to this, and looking at the schedule you have about coming back in July with the finance, what did you say? Talking about the public offering, I think before we do that, and we should probably do it in July, is I think this whole council wants more concrete, what should we do things, and it's hard to think back on all the years that we've had cable and all the changes that have come through it. I mean, when I first started on the cable subcommittee, channels were paying us to broadcast their programs. They paid us per prescription, they gave us the magazines, they donated to the community. So it was a totally different atmosphere, and you know, it was very fun and jolly, and we had money to, you know, put forward into the equipment replacement, and we did a lot of updates, and we kept track of all the different technical technical advances that happened, and we kept pace with that way. And then, I don't want to say abruptly because it wasn't really, but it kind of crept up and changes happened, and programs changed, and we started to have to pay for this and that, and we had to negotiate, and it was a whole different ballgame. So I think it would behoove us as a council and a community to sit down in a study session and hear what are the different pathways we can take. Do we go all the way nothing and say, okay, that's it, no more cable, any kind, we're done? Or all the way fiber to the home, everything we could possibly do. I think those are the two extremes. And then what are the options in the middle? And what's possible? As we heard, maybe we can't get rid of the programming, but maybe we can limit it, or maybe we could play around with it somehow. So I think before we make this decision about what way to borrow money, we need to make the first decision about which direction we're going to go in. So that's my comment.
If I could just clarify for a minute, the last slide that laid out a schedule was just to give you an idea of how long it would take.
Oh, I see.
So we're certainly open to your direction to bring back more specific information about financing as soon as July. But certainly I think staff concurs with the comments that Councilmember O'Connell just made, that may be, unless you were anxious to get more detailed information on the specifics of the financing, it would probably be prudent to approach this the way that you're suggesting.
Dr. Marty?
Since I got the mic, I'll go first. So first of all, the number that we were projecting for potential year 2 revenue, you mentioned that was 11% over our current internet revenue.
Well, the conclusion of the consultant was that there would be 11% increase in revenues. And because there's simultaneously with the increase in internet revenue, the consultant recognized the potential drop-off in like basic cable services. So what the report concluded from Shelter Creek would be there would be an 11% increase in revenues. Overall. And so afterwards I contacted the consultant and said, okay, you need to tell me in exact dollars what are you, and so he went to the spreadsheet and looked at the calculation, and the numbers that I presented is what was reported to us as the actual dollar increase in revenue.
The 10 million that's currently there. So
That's
that
correct.
would still be an issue.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
And if we were to try to take care of both of those with a bond issue, we probably would exceed our 8% margin.
I don't think that would be feasible.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So, Councilwoman O'Connell, I agree with you again. I think the hybrid approach somewhere in there with some money from the city, perhaps a bond. I'm seeing or would entertain or suggest a discussion with the San Bruno Community Foundation. Internet across, Wi-Fi across the city is a public benefit. And they have plenty of money that they could probably lend us at a lower interest rate, since we're such good friends of theirs. Currently, the anticipated interest rate that we're looking at, that provided this model, what was the basis of that for it to be going up in June, July, or, and if you do remember, what was we got a really good rate for the water and wastewater was under, or right around 3 or 2.6 or,
It was,
I don't remember.
Yeah,
it was three.
yeah,
Three.
so since we did the financing back in the fall of last year, interest rates have gone up. And there's anticipation rates will continue to go up with, as we saw last week, with another 25 basis point movement in the Fed funds rate. They anticipate 2 more increases in 2018. So we are in a situation where rates are rising. What I assumed in looking at the,
Thank
thank
you.
you, in looking at the potential interest rates for this financing was the AA plus rating of the city's general fund, and we assumed our average yield was about 3.7%. I mean, that, again, that was a couple months ago. Rates have moved a bit. We won't lock it in until we actually sell the bonds, but just think, less than 4%.
Right around, okay.
Yeah.
Do you recall off the top of your head what our rate was with the water and wastewater?
We were below 4. I think we're like closer to 3.4% on the water and
So we're
wastewater.
up a little bit already.
So this is really helpful, and thank you for this. It kind of gives us we're solving this equation by both ends of finding out how much that money would really cost us and how much we're going to do it, and now do we really want to do it? So having this study session, sooner than later to dive deeper into the situation to understand better. I'm really excited about the home security system expansion of I would love to have that, and I would love to give that business to San Bruno, and I think a lot of people would. It's we have a great service record, and it's something that is needed. I think a lot of people feel more comfortable having that service at home, and also putting it in our buildings. We talked recently about upgrading our security systems. Well, there you go. Some of our facilities could benefit from that. I'm also interested in how we partner with some of the high-tech companies that operate in San Bruno, of seeing how willingly how do they want to work with us? Do they want to be involved in expanding fiber across our whole city? And lastly, we have the old debt and we have the fiber to the home projected debt. And I think we need to clarify that debt at some point of where in those 4 accounts it really belongs, and the accuracy of that amount. If we didn't have the right to take the money, when we only had the right to take the video part of it, and if we were taking more than that, then that credit should be provided back to the cable fund. So I hopefully that staff could find out how to review the records and see what the general fund should have been receiving and what they actually received, and that amount that wasn't officially loaned but taken, that should be resolved. If we're going to resolve all this debt, that should come out of it. Does that make any sense? No?
I don't think it makes sense,
Okay.
because the way I understand it is, so over the last 40 years, X amount of dollar over the time has been going into a general fund. And you're now asking, over the past 40 years, let's try to figure out where that money that went into a general fund bucket, what it paid toward. And that's
No, I'm not
it's an
asking that.
impossible task.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm asking for the sum of the amount of those money. Okay? It should be traceable of how much of it was actually video. Because there was no internet before that. So up until whatever year that is, the city was getting everything they were entitled to by law to get. Then after the internet service came on, the city was also taking a certain portion of that, I believe 5 or 10%, staff could confirm that. That wasn't something that that the general fund should have been receiving. It was something that was removed. Go ahead.
Why not?
Well, I think.
Legally.
Well, legally, you have the right to do, you, the city council, your predecessors on the city council legally had the right to do what we did, including both the equity transfer and the franchise fee on internet revenues.
That's right.
So there's no, you didn't have the right, or that it was, there somehow was something done wrong.
Okay.
So we can calculate the amount, and I think Jim has at least a number that represents the amount of the equity transfer over some number of years.
Okay.
Some,
I just recall going to a study session prior to being on the council, and there was a discussion of that amount of funds that were
Yeah.
not supposed to, well, legal, or however you're
Yeah,
saying it
so
was.
let me explain that. So federal law gives cities the right to charge 5% franchise fee on cable television video services. Comcast, Time Warner, everybody probably across the nation pays 5% franchise fee. That amount is typically collected as a pass-through from ratepayers. In addition, and we do that too. We do that. It's not part of the discussion that we're having tonight. It's a standard practice in the business, and it has been standard in San Bruno. In addition to that, and that's what I call the statutory franchise fee, because it is allowed to municipalities, regardless of who your cable provider is, to charge not more than 5% on basic cable services. In addition to that, for a number of years, we charged a 5% franchise fee. We received in the general fund a franchise fee on internet revenues. So the federal law doesn't provide for that. San Mateo can't charge that to Comcast. But by council policy, if you will, that amount was, like the equity transfer, paid by the cable enterprise to the general fund on an annual basis. So that's the, I hope I didn't create any confusion by using the word statutory. There was no intent to imply that there was something inappropriate or wrongly done. It was simply to distinguish between franchise fees that were charged on two different amounts of cable department revenues.
Okay.
That has been discontinued, along with the staged reduction in the equity transfer that is now down to $375,000 for fiscal year 18-19, for the coming year.
Okay.
Connie, is it true also that the 10 million that's owed right now was largely due to upgrades in the system?
That's correct.
Not an accumulation of years of transfers?
Yeah, well,
Investment.
I would say, so what we reported to the city council a few years back was that the amount of the equity transfer, if you looked at the point at which the cable enterprise started going into deficit, if you looked at that period of years, there was a correlation between the cumulative amount of the equity transfer and the excess franchise fee together, that amount. There was a correlation between that amount and the amount of the deficit. That doesn't mean that that's how the deficit accrued. And I would say more to the point, the more rapid escalation of costs in these recent years related to technology is a is a greater, it is more likely that that is the driver. In other words, if you looked at total expenditures, operating and capital, and play that out over a number of years, you would see that the capital portion of the budget is an increasingly large percentage of total expenditures. And so, I mean, you could look at it, you could say it's a combination, you could get, but I would say the primary, a combination of factors, I would say the primary factor is the investment in technology that has ramped up and become more, the pace has been more rapid and of technology changes, and the cost of that technology has been increasingly expensive. So I don't know, Al, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you happen to know how much we paid to rebuild the system in the late 90s?
Yeah, it was, we had $7 million set aside, and I believe at the very end, we went over by $1 million. It was $8 million.
We rebuilt the system for $8 million in the late 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what I would do in answering that question more precisely would be to go back that far and look at a capital investment in each of the years, and the cumulative capital investment since then.
Okay.
Because at that point, you depleted the reserves in the cable enterprise sector.
It did complete it.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps. Any other questions, comments from council?
I spoke my piece.
Oh, okay. Anything else, City Manager?
No, that concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any further questions if you have any, or take any direction. And the direction that I've heard so far is that you would like a more detailed conversation in July at a study session that would, and I would appreciate any additional feedback after this session about what specific information you would like to receive. But as an example, the information that I just talked to you about, we could also look more carefully at the amounts of equity transfer, excess franchise fee, and any of the other, I think we could present to you information regarding subscribers and per capita, or per subscriber revenues, show you more specifically the decline in basic video. We could give you more information that would show you the growth in internet revenues, and try and put more of the pieces together for you at the detail level that the council is requesting.
I think for me, and I don't know if this is, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know that it's so important to figure out where that 9 million came from and how we got there, but looking at what we have today, where we're going, really analyze, I'm a company coming in and I'm interested in buying this product. Is it worthy, right? What do we want to do? Where do we trim? Where do we cut? Where do we invest? Let's really take a big look at this enterprise.
Well, where it matters
Global
to me,
picture, yes.
where I think it's important is that, if it is the fact that we're charging this, or imposing this equity transfer, if that was like the sole reason that it was going south, and we were just to eliminate that,
Right.
and hey, it could putter along, happily for
Yes.
forever, then that's one thing. But if technology is going to continue to escalate at a rate that exceeds our ability to increase our revenues, then that's a structural problem that
Right.
we can't fix.
That's right.
So, but that would be my interest in understanding the real mechanism of how we got there.
I agree with those two things, and I would also be interested in our options as far as what can we do without, what do our customers really want us to offer them besides high-speed internet, or is that all they need, and can we have a viable company if that's what we offer them? Some of the opportunities that Bob was talking about with business and the home security and all those kinds of things, what does that do to our revenue? I know you can't, it's a lot to ask, but I think those are the things we want to say, like, this is column A, column B, column C, column D. If we do them all, here's what it would look like. If we do A and D, this is what it would look like. I don't know if you can give us, I think we just need enough to say, yeah, let's go for it, or no, there's no way, kind of thing.
And I recall at one of the council meetings that staff was working on a rollout. Would it be over a couple of years of putting this system? If we decided to go for it, it's going to take, was it 2 or 3 years to do? I don't recall exactly what the term was, but that will affect the expenditure rate. So was staff getting close to that, or that was?
Yeah, we can do that too.
Is it how close are we?
You can do it in 2 years. I would say to comfortably be probably 2.5 years to get everybody. Construction company could come in here and build it in 6 months. But like I said before, what takes the longest is converting each home.
Right.
And running the new drop, and that's why I put it up to 2 years. But the system can be built fairly quick with a contractor, a good contractor. They build, 10, 15 miles, in a month, We have 75 miles of plant here.
Okay.
I would just close and say that these are exciting times. I mean, this is really a change in the direction that we've ever gone. But it's also very scary, right? Because it's a big investment, and we're taking something that we did in a very small, very dense situation, whether it's Shelter Creek, Peninsula, Crystal Springs Terrace, and figuring out what the potential is across our entire city. So those are the scary things, right? Those numbers, although they look good, and that's the scary piece. But we are, like you said, Connie, at a crossroads. So.
Okay, so I think council's given direction in regards to coming back with the variables of information and options, and seeing what direction we want it. I'm sorry, thank you. And see what direction we want to take. Sorry. So does staff have enough information?
Yes, and again, as you think of additional questions or thoughts about information that would be helpful to you, we would appreciate hearing about that as well.
And then the budget and capital improvement will be on the June 26th agenda.
Thank you for reminding me. So next Tuesday night, we generally schedule a public hearing on the budget. That is scheduled for the 26th, along with adoption of the budget, should that be the city council's interest. We did not give you an overview of the administrative departments. We generally, we don't have a lot of new information to share with you, but we've gone through all of the field and service delivery operating departments, and hope that you're feeling reasonably well informed. Again, we're happy to take any questions between now and then. I'm compiling thoughts or comments and questions from the City Council that we may not have already answered in these budget study sessions as part of the presentation on Tuesday night, and look forward to finishing up this important process and asking for your consideration of approval on Tuesday.
And then also there'd be a resolution, should we need to continue past July 1?
There will be.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. With that, thank you for staff, all your work, your effort, being here. Appreciate it very much. And if not, we'll go ahead and stand adjourned until Tuesday.